Before I start this video, I'm just gonna say that this gameplay is being used from Latina Parfay's channel. So go sub to him because I do not plan to buy this game because not only do I not like the Elder Scrolls, but also I don't really want to buy a demaster of a game. So anyway, we're just gonna get right into it. So if you haven't been living under a rock for the past 20 years, you might notice that video games have gotten noticeably worse, and that's in a lot of aspects, but in this particular video, it's more so focusing on the death of beauty, and that's in various different categories, such as people, art, and music. The first category we will look at is art, and this has been pretty clear with the death of art styles in video games and very clear with the Oblivion demaster. So we will take a look at some pictures. This first picture is about the game itself that's being shown in this video, which is the Oblivion remaster. Now, if you're not completely blind, you'll definitely notice the difference between the pictures, and that, for example, is that the sword looks noticeably miscolored, the water is more muddy, the greenery looks more brown, and overall, everything looks much more washed out. And the big problem with this is not only is it not very appealing to look at, but the purpose of Oblivion is that it's supposed to be a fantasy game, so therefore the original has a more fantastical art style, and now in the remaster it just looks like every other generic game that looks like real life. Now, of course, this is not just something that's exclusive to this game because, as I said, if you haven't been living under a rock, you might see that since pretty much the beginning of the PS4 and Xbox One generation, these photorealistic games that don't really have an art style are very common. In this image, we have God of War 2018, which is not a very interesting game to look at. Now, on the flip side, we also have this game, which is God of War 3, which was made in 2010, which has a fairly interesting art style, and it makes it stand out from other games. And this is primarily a problem with a lot of Western games, although that doesn't mean that games from other countries are immune to this. And of course, with some games, it does work to have a photorealistic art style, but at the same time, with some games, it makes more sense to have a different sort of art style because not every game needs to look the same. And this isn't just something that's exclusive to video games, because if you, for example, look at paintings from back then compared to today, you can see that there were paintings back then that looked ethereal and they were beautiful to look at, while a bunch of paintings today are they just look like brush strokes on a canvas. Or, you know, they just look like scribbles, like what a toddler would make. So there are things that I think don't just apply to video games, but also apply to many things in the real world. And if I really want to go on a schizo rant, you could say that this is a way to make people depressed and also to just remove beauty from everyday life, because when you think about it, if you remove beauty, you remove people from the divine. And this is something you can see in architecture as well, as it makes things look noticeably more soulless, and it removes all the awe-inspiring elements that you can see in architecture. Anyway, next we'll move on to the music category. Now, this isn't to say that music in video games is entirely bad now. In fact, this is more so focusing on Western games and not so much Japanese games, which definitely I would say, especially Square Enix, still has pretty good music overall, but of course, from the Western side of things, I have noticed a dip in quality. And what I will be doing is showing a song from Assassin's Creed 2, and then I will compare it to a song from Assassin's Creed Shadows, and that is Ezio's Family. Shit, those urban beats go hard, man. I best bump that shit in the gym, for real. But yeah, quite honestly, if you can't hear the quality difference between those two songs, you would have to be deaf or just dumb. But it's not surprising at all that there are people out there who do like this song, and some possibly even better than the original version of Ezio's Family, because people have essentially been conditioned into liking shit music through all the shit music we consume on the regular. And like I said in the art section of this video, there is a real-life variant to this type of music, and of course, the best things I could compare are, let's say, old composers like Beethoven or Mozart, and compare those to today, where we have Taylor Swift and a bunch of different rap artists that people listen to a lot, or the various different metal bands that are just a bunch of noise. In this scenario, I won't be playing any songs because I don't really know what's copyrighted, but I will say go listen to these old composers or any sort of classical music from back in the day and just listen to what people listen to when you're just outside. Like, a lot of people will listen to Taylor Swift, they'll listen to rap, they'll listen to metal, as I said before, because people have been conditioned to like this sort of music more, rather than listening to the beautiful music that was made back then, or even some of it made today, although people don't really listen to it still. And for the last section, I will be talking about people, or I guess you could say characters in video games. It's pretty clear in the past 10 years there's been a big push to make a bunch of characters extremely ugly in video games, and we can see this in examples such as in The Last of Us 2, or another game like Dragon Age Veilguard, where the women look like absolute abominations. This is compared to games from back then, such as Dead Space 3, which had Ellie, or another game like God of War 3, which had Aphrodite, and you can probably see a certain trend between these two types of games. And what's the trend? It's that the women, or I guess quote-unquote women, in the new games look much more manly. And if I wanted to go on a schizo rant about this, I would say that they want people to like men, so that way the birth rate goes down and they can successfully get the population to 500 million people. And there might be a certain group of people that might want to do that, but of course all I'm doing is noticing. There will also, of course, be the usual suspects who point out the actual attractive women in modern video games, like the ones in Expedition 33, as an example for why things are not actually as bad as they seem. But the exception does not make the rule, and just because in maybe 1 out of 100 games there is attractive people, that does not mean that is the trend. Anyway, just like the previous sections of the video, I'm gonna make some real life connections. Back then, you can see that people looked a lot more elegant, especially in the way they presented themselves, but in the modern day, you have people that inflate themselves to such a degree that they end up on mobility scooters, or you have men that play dress up and try to be a woman, and you can definitely see that there's a big difference between the two time periods. Now, I'm sure Beth, who stuffs her face with Big Macs and shakes uncontrollably in rage, will say that this is actually not the case, and she is actually still very beautiful. In fact, possibly even more so than these people, but no, that's just not the case. Anyway, gaming is dead and ugly people killed it, and I'm sure all the usual shills will wail out for this Oblivion Demaster.